One day in the kingdom of Raja, there appeared a great and fearsome beast. The magnificent creature was a presence of torment and fire and death. The dragon eljom left the hills as black and hot as fire in the hearth. He flew across the valley, leaving shadows of the night and scaring the children who huddled against the walls of their homes, bundled in the care of their mothers' and fathers' arms. None in Raja were free of the paranoia of eljom, not even the mighty King Elsevier. The King Elsevier greatly wanted to protect the people of the land of Raja from the great evil that had become of them. But alas, he knew not what could defeat a dragon as harsh and cold as eljom. For even the mightiest of armor and the strongest of sword, the bravest man or the largest army could not kill the bird of prey, covered by 1,000,000 scales of silver. The dragon one night murdered the king's only heir, and his queen, who perished in a gruesome fiery pile of ash and blazing smoke. For the beast was a terrible creature at heart, and it was in this dark time that King Elsevier's council came to him with rumors of a dark mage, Count Glacial, who would help the king to slay the dragon by giving him a gift, as it were. But the king's council warned there would be consequence. The king agreed to meet with the mage, Count Glacial, for in his grief no consequence could be greater than this. In coming through the wood, the king came upon the house of the mage. It was a cabin made of earth and smoke. Before entering the hut, the king put a hand to his men, who paused outside the deerskin flap that hung from the entryway. Only the king could go farther, for this was his burden and his alone. In walking in, the king met an old man with a crutch, sitting in the corner in a chair of thorns and roses, eating some form of raw flesh. The man had an eye patch that was hard to look at, for in it the king saw his sins. The old mage smiled in a way that was mysterious and magical, but also cold and evil. His teeth all were gray and decayed, but for a single tooth, made of some substance that was bright and golden. "I know why you are here, King Elsevier. The dragon has taken your son and your wife, and he terrorizes your kingdom. You cannot defeat such a beast by mortal means. You require magic," said the mage with a twist of the pupil in his good eye so that it shone as white as the snow rolling back into his head. The king spoke with a fierce tongue. "I know you are not much different than eljom. You, a weasel of a man. You were sent to crusade, and instead you refused the church and the courts only to find refuge in the dark arts. A coward and a summoner of defilement and sin. I would not walk an inch into this place of orgies and sacrifice to the devil if I did not care for the ways of God, and such a beast as eljom is no creature of God." The king spit into the dirt floor of the dark mage's hut. "Yes, but you are here, and the dragon eljom is there. You must require something of me. Even if I am what you say, you could not even save your queen and son. What man are you in the eyes of your God?" inquired the mage. "A better one than you," spit the king. "That's not saying much, Elsevier. Do you want the spell or not?" inquired the mage again with a hasty smile. The king nodded. The mage looked up at him, rolling his good eye back into place, and with an amused gesture waved his finger to the king. You must remove your rosary from your armor and kneel with your sword in the earth straight. The king, hesitant, looking around. A king does not kneel. The mage interrupted. The king will do as the mage asks of him if he is to slay Eljom. Don't worry, your precious crusaders will not see you bow to a commoner. The king placed his sword into the ground straight and removed his rosary from his breastplate, laying it upon a chest nearby. The rosary had come from his wife, carved by an artisan from the Holy Land. Count Glacial began to chant in a language the king had not heard before. Calicente duminto latic. The old mage pulled his gold tooth from his mouth to fall onto the ground as the tooth melted into a suit of golden armor that shined like the sun. When the king woke, the hut was gone, and he was surrounded by his men, who were staring down at the golden suit as it lit up the forest in the night. Next to the suit lay a sword made of red silver. The king reached near him to find the rosary gone. He picked up the suit of armor to fit it to his form, and it was perfectly cast. As the king and his council walked to the edge of the forest, the king could see the dragon Eljom's fire, as bright as the stars lighting the valley of the kingdom of Raja, as if the night was day. The shadows cast were light, ghostly embers in a storm of wind and death. As the king walked from the clearing, he caught the eye of the great silver dragon, Eljom. The king raised the blood-red sword that shone in the depths of despair, like a flare of rage and hunger, blinding the serpent of the skies, who fell to the ground, thrashing over the fields and wailing, hungry for the king. Elsevier mounted his horse and rode to where the hawk of death was slicing the head of Eljom from his body, so that Eljom was no more. He had saved his kingdom. Wearing his suit, the king walked back to his chambers to take off his armor for the great feast, only to find that the armor itself was welded to his body like metal to metal. Panicking, the king tried and tried, but he could not remove the armor that shone like the sun. The golden armor was not to be removed. This was the consequence to which Glacial had spoken. Quickly, the king rallied his men who rode into the forest. They searched into the night, and for weeks and months, trying to find the dark mage, but none could find him in all the places they looked. He had gone, and the king was without any solution. He grew depressed, and he secluded to his castle chambers, for there would be no new heir and new queen. He would be forever alone in the golden armor. Enraged, the king threw the sword into the night, deep into the Blumberry wood, where it turned into the rosary, forever entombed in the forest. 10 years had passed until the king's council knocked on his chamber door. They had been told to only disturb him if they had solved the mystery of the golden armor. It was his high priest Jameson, now a much older man, who had taken the king's responsibilities. "Sire, I bring you a maiden to care for you." The king threw his chamber pot at the doors, screaming with the curtains drawn on all his windows. I do not want to be disturbed. I have no need of her. No woman can see me. I am but a stone and a freak. I will have none of this, Jameson. The girl spoke with the sweetest voice the king had ever heard. She was kind-sounding, like the moon at night. My name is Eloise. I will not judge thee, my king. The king looked at the girl, whose face and hands were wrapped in cloth. What is wrong with her? Is she sick or something? The girl began to weep for fear, and Jameson spoke. She has leprosy. The king, infuriated, spoke. You dare bring a leper into the king's bedchambers. Jameson spoke. She is from my congregation, and she has no human contact. But sire, with your affliction, she cannot touch you, and you either. The king snapped. You dare remind me of that? Jameson gave a silent cry. Sire? The king replied with reluctance. Very well. Come hither, girl, so you are also a leper. Do you like my skin? It is made with the blood of eljom. Well, the girl gave a hesitant and hushed. I do not. Interrupting, the king screamed, Do you? Yes, came the girl's voice, feeling shame as she cowered. Must you frighten me so? You do? You do as they say in the valley. Shine like the sun, but sire, if none shall have me in their company, may I at least be welcome to the humility to serve the one person who also cannot be in the company of another. The king gave a curt response. You start now, bring me a bowl of pudding and some meat from the stores. Go, girl. Things went as this each and every day between the king and his new maid. They conversed, and each stayed from the people around the king, from his responsibilities to Raja, and the girl from all else who lived in the world and were not of the lepers. One quick evening, when the girl was changing the king's bedpan, he asked of her, Maid, how did you come to have leprosy? The girl looked up at the wall, for he had forbode her to look upon his glowing armor. It was in the care of my mother, who was sick with the disease herself, and it had spread to my two brothers, whom I cared for deeply, and they all died. The girl could not see it, but underneath the suit the king had a smile on his face, but not one of sadness, one of a different kind. Just then there was a knock on the door. The king spoke to whomever it should be. I am not easily disturbed, and who comes to my chambers? The answer was that of Jameson. Come in, replied the king. Your Honor, we have found a solution, I believe, said Jameson, interrupting the conversation between the king and Eloise. Well, said the king to Jameson, whose pause unnerved the king. What have you? There is a holy man who lives near the Falklands Islands. At the edge of your land he may provide an answer. But we must hurry. He is known to travel, and if we are not there within 3 months, he will have left for Hauntery, came Jameson's words as if silk to the king's ears. The king and his men mounted their horses. The king's servant lay in the wagon, for she could not ride a horse for fear of the animal to fall ill, but the king would not go without her. They traveled across vast ocean and lands over a 3-month trek at the highest speed until they traversed a bridge over a long and deep chasm to a mountain monastery on the island Tane of Falklands. They had come at the most opportune time, for upon approaching the gate, a man in long red flowing robes, tied around the waist by a buckled leather strap, was loading a wagon with his livelihood for the road to Hauntery. "Stop, holy man," yelled the king, falling from his horse as he glowed in the morning light. "I am come here to speak with thee. Please, you are my only hope for an heir and a wife. This armor was given by a mage of darkness to slay the dragon Eljom. It is wielded on, and I cannot face human touch." The holy man spoke with a laugh. "Ha ha! My good man, all you need to do is to find true love before the next 4 full moons and marry, and you will be rid of your armor. You had no need to travel to a man such as me, though humbled I am." "You mean all that time it was that simple?" came the king with shock. The holy man came with a laugh like a bright morning dew. "My good sir, true love is never that simple." As the holy man rode away, the king and his men rode back to the castle and traversed the seas. They finally came back with a month to go until the 4th full moon. The king did not know where to go, but his council had decided that they would acquire a queen from a distant land to marry the king. The only problem was that the queen was also a powerful sorceress from the fairy realm, who had been apprenticed to the dark mage Count Glacial, and she did not love the king. Though the king was enamored by her beauty, the woman's beauty was only skin deep. On the inside she was hideous. The fairy queen ensnared the king with her charm and graces, but all was a ploy and a lie. The king, although he did not know it deep in his heart, loved the maid Eloise. But he could not admit to himself that he could be truly and deeply in love with, of all women, a leper. Lepers could not love. However, Eloise was walking in the Blumberry Wood, and to her surprise found the rosary which had belonged to the king's beloved. And admiring its beauty, she placed it around her neck, and to her surprise her bandages fell from her form to the forest floor, and she was healed, and as beautiful and kind and loving as ever. Immediately she went to the king, who called off the wedding with the fairy queen, who grew angry for her lust for power, and in her anger she used a spell to turn Eloise into a fearsome beast, so that no one could love her ever again. The king, furious with the fairy queen, threw her into the dungeons, never to be seen again. So harsh was the death of his true love that the king Elsevier, in his golden suit of armor, threw himself from his bedchamber window in his moment of seclusion, just as the full moon dawned on the 4th month, and he died as soon as he hit the courtyard below. On the night of the king's funeral, a feast is to be held in his honor. So the king's guard went out into the wood to hunt for meat, finding in a clearing the beast, and upon killing the creature with an arrow, the fairy queen's curse was lifted, and Eloise became a beautiful young woman again. Going to the king's casket, wearing still the rosary upon her neck, Eloise cried, and as her tears fell upon the golden suit of armor that shone like the sun, the armor melted away, revealing a handsome young king whose eyes opened awake to the vision of his true love. Thus the two married to bring happiness, joy, and love to the kingdom of Raja. The end.